piece for the.
He went and got donuts while I was in choir rehearsal this morning. So.
Yeah. I make no judgment. All right, all right. Let's get this party started. Well, greetings and salutations to you all. Thank you. Just a reminder, we are live on the YouTube, and you can always catch up on the recorded classes by going to the YouTube channel under the Christian Education playlist, or where the classes are recorded. And you're welcome to, if you miss a class or you need to catch up later on, or if you're just so excited about the class, you just want to go through it again, boom, it's there for you. But it would be good for us to introduce ourselves to each other once again. And last week I had the folks who were online go first. I'm going to have y'all go last. And we'll start off with this direction over here, come around. I'll go, and after I go, then I'll go up to y'all. You're going to say your name and one thing you like about being in the dark.
My name's Colton Hedrick. Hello. One thing I like about being in the dark is that campfires are much more enjoyable.
Okay. My name is Caitlin Hedrick. I very much appreciated being in the dark this morning. Judy Fulmer and I were seated next to each other, and the Christ candle just was shining so much more brightly since the lights were out. Felt nice.
Emily Hobby, I like lightning bugs in the dark.
Mike O'Brien, I like the dark because I can see the stars, but do it big and bright, even bright.
Okay.
I like the dark because you can take joy in knowing that the electric bill is going to be small.
And Marcia, how do you spell your name?
Marcin.
Okay, good. And last name?
Miscall.
Thank you. Josh Robinson, one thing I like to be in the dark is especially more technological, when you have kind of the night vision, like on the Ring camera, and then you get to see the critters as they're in the dark, but you get to see them behave as if you're not able to see them, and to see them kind of in their natural, behaving as they naturally would, without disturbing them. And so that's one thing I like about the dark. All right, let's go with Marcelo.
My name is Marcelo, and what I like most about the dark is the reprieve it gives you from the bombardment of visual stimulation you get during the day.
All right, right on.
My name is Kitty Kosachata. I think what I like about being in the dark is the coming to peace with yourself and taking a mental journey of things that have been going on.
Really going deep. All right, Diane.
What are we doing?
And Carla. Good. We're introducing ourselves. We're not going to go back around, but your name and one thing you like about being in the dark.
Oh, nothing. Carly Young, yeah, not a lot.
Okay,
I've
good.
been sleeping. Yeah, I do not like being in the dark. I even on a night light on when I'm sleeping. Diane Rogers.
Good. Thank you. All right. Good. Let's pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for the beauty of this day and for the many gifts that are within it. We pray that you would help us take advantage of the time that is before us in this hour, for us to grow in our faith and to encounter you in rich and meaningful ways. Thank you for the gift of technology that enables us to connect with our friends who are not nearby. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. We are doing Rich Church, Poor Church. And so last week we did the introduction in chapter 1. we're doing a little bit of a slow journey, a slow cook to kind of get started. This week, we're doing chapter 2. Next week, we're going to step into chapter 3 and 4. These are really easy chapters to read. And I think, maybe 15 minutes for a chapter, maybe. They're not heady content, but I do think they are very poignant and very revealing to how congregations can navigate its way out of a poor church thinking towards a rich church thinking. Anybody have a perspective from last week about the differences between rich church, poor church? It's not really based about the bottom line of a financial budget, right? It's not about whether they're in debt or they're flush with money as much as something else. How would y'all, just from what we talked about last week, the difference between a rich church, poor church, and what he's trying to set up?
Maybe mixing up my chapters, I can't keep anything straight, but to me, it's what is your message? Your message should be your mission and focus on your mission. In our case, we would be the Bible, worship, grow in faith, follow Jesus by serving others. That's our mission. So how do we should focus our messages on those things. I think we're going to leave the other one.
Good, thank you. And we're gonna hit a good bit of that today. Good. What else? What else do we remember from last week? Okay, if you cheat, if you got your handout from last week, it's all right. It's not a pop quiz.
Some people don't like money. Some people do like money.
Absolutely. Good. And what would in the concept of rich church, poor church, how would that fall, Mike?
How would that fall? When you're talking about what you can do. Help people.
So what would a rich church do with regard to talking about money?
How can we help people? How can we build programs, not how much it costs?
Or how we have used a resource. We've done this with the resources that we've been given.
Yeah, a rich church just wouldn't have any problem talking about money. In a poor church has concerns talking about money. I think last week, if you remember, one of the things that we talked about is knowing your why. Why, being able to answer the why. Why should I give my money to you, to this organization, versus why give my money to the church versus the United Way or to our alma mater. By the way, I am going to certainly get some harassment from our Nebraska Cornhusker fans. Yes.
You're lucky Marcia Davis has moved back to Nebraska.
Oh, she watches online. I'm gonna get it from her. And Clark Pengra, our facilities manager, I know I am in for it. But that being said, but alma mater, right? Why give our, being able to answer the why was one of the things we talked about. And a poor church would not be able to answer that because the poor church doesn't know their why. And that's going to tie a little bit into where we are today. I think for the most part, I want to encourage you, whether you read the chapter or not, to come. It's okay because we're going to have some conversation. Last week, we had a good bit of try to catch up. I want to try to get to some of the discussion questions today. So I want to try to hit some of the highlights from the chapter and then have us hit into some of those discussion questions. So Cliff Christopher talks a little bit about his points to make, and he outlines 5 kind of different realms of thinking in this about knowing your mission, a rich church versus a poor church. A rich church is the first one there, mission versus survival. A rich church is always focused on mission. Everything revolves around the mission. The mission is well known by everyone in the church. It's what unites, it's what drives each decision. Hello, Natalie. I did, on behalf of Mission Presbytery, which is our governing body, I was tasked to do a 3-year evaluation of one of our neighboring Presbyterian churches this last Tuesday. And I met with their session, and one of the question is, what is the mission of your church? And in unison, without missing a beat, all of them recited the mission. And when I asked them about various parts, they were able to answer how they were attending to each of those parts without missing a beat. That was a church that knew how, that was mission centric, right? That was a rich church idea versus poor church, always focused on survival. Primary goal is balance the budget. Church focuses on how to keep things from changing because the church at least knows it's alive in the present. This is a church that's dedicated to keeping its members happy and content. I don't have time to tell you the story of the bridge, but maybe for another day. I think in the story of Hope Presbyterian Church, and some of our longer term members would know that story, that there was a significant amount of time where we operated from this survival mode. Sometimes that was dictated to us because of financial situations that we were in, having emergency situations or uncovering alarming situations, and sometimes that just became normalized in a way that we were just always focused on, how are we going to navigate, how are we going to make it this year? When I arrived, one of the things that was very uncomfortable to me 10 years ago, that was a normal part of the congregation, was when they finalized the budget, was at a budget retreat on the first Saturday of January. And I'm looking at Natalie and Mike and Emily. So the first 2 years that I was here, and maybe y'all attended those, or maybe you didn't, I don't remember. But it was a Saturday retreat, the first Saturday in January, and all of the elders and various key parts of the staff were invited to the choir room, big table, and it was a 6-hour retreat where we would volley and jock for dialing for dollars, like who was going to get the budget, how are we going to solve this thing, and it was very uncomfortable. A full day set aside to kind of fighting for dollars and how are we going to cut and who's going to win and rule the day. And the next year, by design, I had made it say that we were going to reduce it down to 3 hours, which we did. And also intended that that was going to be the last year we were ever going to do that. And we adopted a brand new process and went a different way. But that wasn't, that was met with resistance because that was how we set our budget. We met on the first Saturday in January, and we labored against each other to get the budget. We fought against each other to get the budget that was for my department, of what suited best for me. And we all brought our values and our beliefs, and we would argue and fuss about it. And sometimes when we would do that work on the first Saturday in January, we would finalize it, wrap it up. Maybe it wasn't beautiful, and a lot of times it wasn't. And then we would present that information to the congregation a month later. And those oftentimes were not very beautiful annual meetings. Correct? Mike's smirking because he knows that they weren't very beautiful meetings at times. And sometimes, what's that?
I said we had the longest one I've heard.
And sometimes the congregation meeting would force the session to go back and change the budget. And that's not how these things work. And so a life around a system organized around the budget versus being organized around its mission. And he unpacks that a little bit more. Rich church versus poor church, lives versus money. A rich church always talking about how they are changing lives, transforming lives, is not raising money is their business. Money is always seen as the tool for mission. The battle cry, testimonies of people whose life has been changed by Christ. The poor church always talking about how they need more money. Battle cry, we need to balance the budget because we're short. And I talked a little bit about that last week, about this idea of church stick-up men, right? Give us your money, give us your money. And getting up, and he talks an example of that. And it's not an example that's unique to him, of someone in leadership getting up and from the pulpit saying, you know what, we got to pay for the electricity bills, and you know what, we got to flush the toilets around here, and I guess we're just going to have to not flush toilets anymore, and you can bring your own toilet paper because you guys aren't giving enough money, right? Or we're going to have to adopt a new policy. If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it on down, right? I mean, these tactics are poor church mindset tactics. These are guilt, shame. These are bullyish. These are not mission focused lives, transforming mission focused perspectives. Service versus facility. Emphasis is placed on how it, as in like the facilities and we, can be of service, versus a poor church emphasis on how it should be caring for its facility. The church is in love with its tradition, facility, and history, tradition, facility, rather than Jesus, a museum to keep memories alive. I have this idea, and I want you to think through it. And it's a story I told 10 years ago when I offered this class, and I tell you it again. I want you to imagine that Hedrick's. I am going to make you an offer. I have a nice house in Cedar Park, and it's housing value. It's great. I'm going to gift it to you. $0. I'll even pay for the title transfer, the service fees, this, that, and the other. I'm just going to give it to you. The only caveat is this. The only thing is this, is that you can't bring anything with you, and you can't change anything inside of it. So the pictures on the wall would be of me and my family. The Bible on the mantle would be my family Bible. The dishes are what my family picked out. The tools in the garage, as janky as they may be, would be mine. Can't bring your dog.
Whoa.
You have our dog and our guinea pig.
No.
Can't bring your clothes. So you'll just have to fit into mine or my wife's. Everything as is, and you start living there. Do you take the gift?
But we don't currently own a home.
Yeah, no, that's ridiculous. It's a great analogy, though. I like that.
It was the dog for me.
It was the
felt
dog.
Good until it was the dog.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure your dog was great, but
Oh,
Mine
it's
was
Sparky. I mean, it's Sparky. I think that, and obviously, I'm tongue in cheek, being cheeky there a little bit, but the first church that I served, for the most part, that was the analogy. That was the truth. Nothing on the walls had changed since 68, 69. There was zero evidence of any of the family that had lived in that house from the 70s to present day. It's 2009 when I arrived. There were no updated pictures in the youth room, except for every year the seniors would do handprints on a particular wall. That was the only thing that got updated. Otherwise, the memorial plaques, were from the Korean War, World War II, the stained glass windows, nothing changed. Everything had to stay exactly the way it was. And it was uh, a museum to keep memories alive. And one of the biggest falling outs that happened in my time there was something got moved out of the sanctuary. And it took a 3-month apology tour from the senior pastor to recover from. And I think through that perspective, when you go to visit churches, especially like when you visit ours, and I think through this now, there is reflection of the family that is living here now. There is evidence of the family that used to live here as well. If you go down one of the hallways, you can see the quilts, right? And that was long before I was ever here. I don't know what the art project was. I don't know half the people who contributed to the patchwork of that. It's beautiful, and it was a beautiful snapshot of a point in time. But there's also all this other evidence of the family who's living here now. And I think that is a perspective of thinking about that facility. I'll find this article. I read an article this week about why gymnasiums on church campuses are a bad investment, that are not in line with contemporary mission of churches. But in the 90s, it was absolutely the thing you had to do. But it is not the golden goose that it was in the 90s. And I'll see if I can find that article, because that really shocked me, because I just had this idea of converting our gym to a pickleball court. So I think we could do something. I know, I just had to figure out how to make it happen. That being said, a rich church perspective on its facilities is, how can we use this campus as a tool for the ministry of God versus how do we preserve it and not allow anybody to change it? The other thing that really drove me crazy in one of the churches I served was how angry they got when the basketball court got scuff marks. They hated scuff marks on the basketball court. What was that? That was evidence that it was being used by the people who were enjoying it for the purpose in which it was being built. And they hated it that the scuff marks were on the floor. Don't get me started. Discipleship versus appeasement. Rich Church, the customer is not currently within the walls of the church, must be committed to making disciples, not appeasing the persons. Poor church mindset. In reality, the dominating decision-making factor is appeasement. And I think this is where he used that idea of that example, like with appeasement of, well, we don't do these things that we really want to do. Why? Because there's these two families who are the main givers, and if we upset them, then we'll have no more money. And we don't want to topple the apple cart. And because we're afraid that we know how much we might have an idea of how much they give, and if they go, then that really could mean we're in big financial trouble, and so they're gonna be able to get whatever they want. That could really be a big deal for us. We're gonna appease them, and then they hold the power. And that theologically, my friends, is well, it's not even theologically, that is not in alignment with the mission of the Church of Jesus Christ. Just put a fine point on that. We are not in the business of appeasing those who are our biggest donors, and the biggest donors don't rule the day because they are our biggest donors. We aren't in the power in the business, so to speak, of ascribing power just because of someone's check. Now, in nonprofit world, there is that mindset that I am not as familiar with. Carla might be more familiar with it. She runs a nonprofit. I think about academic institutions. They know who their big givers are, and that is a completely different mindset. And those folks probably do wield a lot of power. But then there are also channels that, as they give, there is power that is allocated to them, maybe a seat on the board, or roles in leadership, or name on a building, etc. But this is the Church of Jesus Christ. When we give, we're giving for the service we're a rich church. Those who give within a church is giving for the service of building up and promoting the church of Jesus Christ, not so that we may have a better seat at the table. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Jesus versus the church. The rich church, a lot of talk about Jesus. The talk is unashamedly about the one whom each has pledged to follow. Everything is about and for Jesus. This is what people want to support. A poor church mindset. The discussion is what the church needs. The motivation is to act for the preservation of the church. It is almost never about Jesus, just the church. I think when one of the conversations that I'm going to pick on Mike and I had recently, and it's really not a conversation Mike and I had, because I will say that there are in many ways that Mike and I have been in agreement, but an air conditioner went out down the hall, a few rooms down the hall. Was it 107 maybe? It's a tiny little room at the end of the hall, and it's a 2.5 ton unit. It's not the biggest, it's literally one of the smallest air conditioning units on campus, but it still costs a lot of money to replace. And there was a thought process of, well, let's just not replace it. We'll get around to it, at some point, maybe in the next calendar year, in the next fiscal budgeting cycle. And but that's a room that we use for ministry right now, right? That's a room that is, along with all of these other rooms, that to take it offline and to take it away from the service, the mission of what we're doing here collectively, is a reduction in our pursuit of focusing on Jesus. And maybe that focuses a little bit more on service and facility, but the idea of keeping that the main thing is no, we need to focus on this now, because it's in alignment with who we are, what we're about, what we're trying to accomplish, which is to ensure that the gospel of Jesus Christ is continuing to be spread. Questions on that?
I liked how he said it in the book, to focus that at the beginning and the end of all our committee meetings, we should ask ourselves those questions about what we're doing. So it says, at the beginning and the end of meetings at the church, we should ask, what purpose does this serve? If we do this, how does it advance the cause of Jesus Christ? Is it Jesus who would have us make this change? Is it Jesus who is calling us to change? Is it Jesus who wants us to spend this money? But that would be an interesting reflection if we did that for our committee meetings.
Yeah. Which commissions do you serve on?
Generation to generation.
Are you still in Hope Memorial Garden?
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm up to Road Circle.
Yeah, how might that have an impact in the endowment committee? No, I'm asking, how might that?
Well, I think that's something that the committee is, that's why I'm going through the class again, is that we're re-examining what is our why. And since we hit the financial downturn in the market and weren't able to operate as we had before and offer grants or anything like that, we're closely re-examining how the committee has been structured and what is our why. Trying to get into that.
Good. What about in your personal lives, and thinking about putting Jesus at that center? Can you go through those questions again, but asking it from the perspective, think about as she reads them, think about it from the perspective of your own decision-making process with Jesus as the center of your decision-making process. Ask these questions again.
Yeah, it's kind of good. I was thinking about your family budget, right? What purpose does this serve? If we do this, how does it advance the cause of Jesus Christ? Is it Jesus who would have us make this change? Is it Jesus who is calling us to change? Is it Jesus who wants us to spend this money?
what might be inherent change, concerns, what might be inherent for our personal selves, what might be inherent concerns in that thought process?
Or maybe how much you decide to pledge during a certain year.
Maybe, right? Maybe some over, and personally, it might be that, it might breed some internal shame or guilt, which is what part of what Jesus is there to do, which is to unburden us from shame and guilt. Or it may be wielded within a relationship or a couple of, we are not going to be doing this because Jesus wants us to be doing this and not that. And that is a waste of money. We're going to be doing this, young man. Okay, chill down that back. Sorry, Mama, I never heard those words from you. I never heard those words from you. In case y'all don't know, Kitty is my mother. Kitty is my mother. Yes, Emily.
Well, I've been looking at those questions in teaching a class, I can't name what it was, but with the first graders, we were teaching them the difference. What is a need and what is a want?
Mhm.
And I'm thinking in a family situation, the wants of your children, and you want to provide these extra things, but is it what we need to do right now? How do we convey where our values are? Is this a need or a want?
Yeah. Good. Let's look at some of these reflection questions. And Katie and Marcelo, I know that the Peanut Gallery, you're still there, so I haven't forgotten y'all. Y'all feel free to chime in as you see fit. Do the members of Hope Church understand what the mission of our church is? And there's a difference between knowing what our mission statement is, right? That's at the top of the page. Invite all to worship God, grow in faith, follow Jesus by serving others. There's a difference between knowing what it is and knowing what the statement is and knowing what our mission is. And for those of you, especially some of you who are newer to our community, do you have a sense of that the members of our church know what the mission is versus just what the mission statement says? Or even some more longer term members, of course.
I want to say that since I'm not always there to see people's interactions, I do see it with the people who contribute to the meal train, how always eager they are and ready to serve others in need.
Good, yeah. Good, yeah. So that part of that mission is in the way in which we show that a high value of our congregation's mission is compassion care and supporting others when they're going through hardships. Good, that's part of the mission, that there's something that's evidenced by our actions. Good. What else might be?
There's a lot of times, I'm not sure, I don't know everybody, but I've had feelings that we don't focus on the mission. And then our ongoing struggle with HCC, one of the things that been bothering me for years. We gotta get back on mission.
Hope Children's Center. I wonder about that too, Mike. I wonder though. I think there are strategic visions where some plans, some visioning needs to take place that still falls under the umbrella of the mission of what we're about. And definitely there are some areas that haven't been attended to that need some shoring up. That could be a part of some vision planning, like, okay, well, now we have this gymnasium. How best can we utilize it for ministry to support the mission of what we're all about?
I was just thinking, I agree with Kitty. I do think nurturing our family is something that we're good at. But then when we serve on church committees, I think sometimes our judgment gets a little off base. And I found personally, it's sometimes what I need to do is say, I'm too boxed in from where I've been. I have to move back and let the world move forward. And you know, I can't get my head around some of those things yet. So let me step out of the way and let people with vision bring me along with them.
Good. Good.
It takes a certain level of maturity.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think sometimes we lose maturity and feel like we have to stay. This is where I've been, this is my job.
It's safe and secure, familiar.
Well, and we feel important, and so it's hard to let go. We see that a lot. But, you know, that's a current issue.
I think spiritual maturity also, so regardless of age, I think spiritual maturity also plays a part of that as well. So, and where someone might be in the development of their faith journey, might also play, and how they sit at the table and participate in the mission. Also, a big part of the cultural churches of origin, right, where they come from. We are an incredibly diverse ecumenical congregation. From yes, there's a healthy portion of us that have been lifelong Presbyterians, but we have a high volume of Methodists, Episcopalians, Baptists, Catholics. I'm missing one.
Jewish.
Lutherans. Well, oh yeah, well, I'm talking about predominant ones, right? The larger ones. Episcopal, Methodist, Baptists, and Catholics. We have and Lutherans. Those are the biggest 5 outside of Presbyterian. And there's a lot that comes from those family of origins, those family tradition of origins that have an influence into this community. Go ahead.
That's one of the things that I found most inviting about Hope when we came to Hope was that it was a more open-minded church and that you weren't in this rigid theological groove. There was only one way to think and believe, but you could listen to someone else's ideas. They respected your ideas. They didn't expect you to be in the same place in your faith journey that they were in their faith journey. And I think that the more cosmopolitan, I don't know what you call it, but it was just that atmosphere, because we come from a variety of different backgrounds, made the church to me a better place for me to grow.
There's one other group that you didn't mention. And that's that we didn't all come from the Southern Church.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
And I'm one of those folks that was born in New York. And they mentioned Smart, New Jersey. Oh, okay. I went to school in New Jersey. And we did things different ways. And when I moved to Texas, I went to work as an associate pastor for Fred Morgan, your former pastor. And he was the first pastor I had ever met from the Southern Church. And when I was in school, or going to school, our presbytery said all of our candidates needed to go to seminaries of our denomination unless you had a particularly good reason, like you were planning to be a professor, PhD, and you thought Princeton, might be, well, Princeton was one of our seminaries, but, I never knew that, where Austin, there was a seminary in Austin, because that wasn't part of my denomination. And Fred did things differently. People got called.
you can say that again.
Yes. And it was, sometimes I just had to ask why, do you do this way? And we had a different history. I mean, the whole denomination had a different history. Our main offices, one was in New York, the other one was in Atlanta. I did some volunteer work in New York City. You know, it was just a different world. And now reunion took place in '83, so that's been, you know, quite a few years now, but there's still folks around that remember when people talked about reunion, it was the old UP in the Presbyterians USA. I mean, just different.
Yeah, I think if
different
you,
history.
knowing the congregation, I think most of the folks in worship this morning, when I asked if you were a non-native Texan, most of them were north of Mason-Dixon. My guess would be not many came from the southeast to here. Most came from north, and so I appreciate you sharing that. And I think you're right. I mean, not only are they from these other backgrounds, but also even within lifelong Presbyterianism, there's big differences there as well. And we bring all these to us. Thinking about Hope Presbyterian Church, would you say is the mission of Hope Church a unifying factor in our congregation? And if so, in what way? Or you can look down at question number 5. In what way do we communicate? Does our communication center around survival or around the mission? What seems to stand out?
I think at this point in time, we center around the mission, and I think it is unifying. I think there have been times in the history of the church where it was the other way around. But like you said earlier, because of reasons it had to be. I think being a debt-free church is amazing to allow us to focus on the mission of survival.
Sometimes as a person who has not been here very long or very much, it's hard to tell. I would say, having talked to you, it's mission, but my first answer would be, well, let's wait till stewardship month, and maybe next month, and see what folks say, and why we are doing whatever we're doing in stewardship time.
You know, I would, as I read this, I was thinking there's a fine line when we, what are we seeing as a message of survival versus a message of transparency. This is what it costs for us to conduct our mission. This is what it costs to develop disciples on this campus that will go out into the community. And so I think it's important that we be transparent in the congregation of the cost of developing disciples.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I 100% believe in transparency of all of it. One of the things that Mike and I have worked on for years is part of what we have to do. And Mike, for y'all, Mike's the treasurer for the church. And part of what he and I have tried to do is what are the 1,000 different ways in which we can provide folks who read numbers differently. So Mike and I are very much, I would rather look at I want 15 pages with numbers that are in black and white. Give me that. That works for me. That works for Mike. But last week, he and I developed a new thing. We haven't published it yet. It will come out next month, where it's just one visual, and that'll be much easier to look at. And actually, within my left side of my brain, the creative side of my brain, it actually made a whole lot more sense to the left side of my brain. And so we're constantly looking at a variety of different channels because we have such a variety of different folks that we want to be transparent. There should be no secrets ever. Anytime you want to know something, period, full stop, you are the members of the church. It's your information. And how you want to know it, we can give you the fire hydrant or a trickle or just a snapshot. You tell us what you want. And without you having to ask, we should be sharing it. Now, that in part because I think a church should respect the maturity of its members and the intelligence of its members. Why? Because God gave you brains and expects you to use them, right? And also, secrets breed distrust, and we're not about distrust. Jesus was not about secrets nor about distrust, although Jesus did say, don't go tell people about who I am. And that's a whole nother different part of this. The messianic secret is a whole different thing, not about this though.
Time for discussion.
Yes, I have encountered a number of churches, and this church for many years was not as open and transparent and telling its story about its finances until it was time. And then we would come with the red alarm or the big wallop, and then we would wallop. And then part of the feedback we heard is, why did it take you so long to tell us this information? And so our mission, our goal, part of our goal is let's take attention away from being that survival church by the information's always there. You can always have it. Let's not let that be the thing that wins the day. Let's let the thing that wins the day is, how are we focusing on the mission of the church? And one of the things over the last 5 years that we've really invested a lot in is the Matthew 25 mission. And that has been the thing that has allowed us to say yes and no. Does it align with the mission of Matthew 25? Yes. Then let us pursue it. Is it something that is outside the bounds of our Matthew 25? Then it may be a fantastic and beautiful idea, but we will pass. And we've had to say no to some things because it may be in alignment or out of alignment with what has been our mission. And that has been a beautiful guidepost for us as we have been going through it. And this last spring, as we set a short-term mission for our community, accepting, belonging, connecting has been our short-term mission that has been giving us guidance on our decision-making process, which you've heard us going through over the last month, and implementing that in worship and providing testimonies about how that is a part of how we're trying to grow and enrich the discipleship of our community and out into the community as well. Any questions on that? I'm on the last page there, and I'd like for y'all to think about this. I'm taking this from page 14 and 15. The mission of the church is fairly simple, and I'll let you read that paragraph. The question I want y'all to reflect on this week: how can our church move towards being more focused on mission versus survival, money, facility, and pleasing certain factions? And maybe think a little bit more as you receive communications from the church, as you look at the bulletin, as you look at the newsletter, which comes out next Sunday, as you receive, as you think more about what you've learned about hope, if there are ways in which we're tending more towards survival, money, facility, and pleasing others, how might you let us know? Marcia, to answer to you about stewardship season. Stewardship season is 13 months long. It is always stewardship season. Specifically, the month of October the sermon series is going to be focused, the entirety of the month is going to be focused on the financial stewardship. And the first 3 weeks of November will be focusing on the stewardship of legacy and participating and contributing to the ongoing work of Jesus Christ after we die and what that looks like. And our pledge dedication Sunday is the second Sunday in November. And so our operations around stewardship isn't, we don't just talk about it once a year. We work on it all throughout the year. That's part of how we try to operate, so that there isn't any, oh God, I know that this is the one Sunday is going to talk about money, so I'm not going to show up on that Sunday. We used to do that, and then no one would show up on that Sunday. We talk about it all the time. And no shame, no guilt, no loss, no fuss. Any questions? A little bit quicker next week, chapter 3, chapter 4. So a little bit more to cover in the same amount of time. Cool. Great. I'm going to the stewardship conference over the next 5 days, and I look forward to bringing back some materials and learnings, best practices, as it were. And I will see if I can get some swag for you guys. And yeah. Oh, definitely endowment focus as well. Would anybody be so kindly to close us in prayer today? Thank you, Emily.
Good and gracious God, give you thanks for the many lessons in our lives. Let the words of your teachings seep into our hearts and our minds. We can be better servants as we go out from here. Keep us all safe and bring us back home together. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Vaya con Dios, amigos.
So you get to travel for your.
I have a question real quick.
Marcelo.
So my parents' church, their ESL classes are apparently full, and my mother wanted me to ask if they could send any overflow to Hope. And if so, how much it costs for ESL classes, or how much they could expect to pay for materials or anything.
Yeah, keep it real simple. hopeaustin.org/ESL. And all the information's there, and there's an online form they can fill out. And we just did registration like a week ago. So definitely got space, and I don't remember all the answer about finances, but I it's nominal. So yeah, we just got it started.
Cool.
hopeaustin.org/ESL. And if you have any problems with that, send me an email and I'll get it back to you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Do I get to travel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm traveling there. I'm traveling
Where are you
to Minneapolis.
Oh, wow.
And what's more about that is that my flight was at 4 this afternoon. And just as this was starting, I got a ticket saying, guess what? It's now 9:30 tonight.
Oh, wow. That could or could not be good.